artificial intelligence helping to solve an ancient mystery from the Roman Empire.
For nearly 2,000 years, Pompeii's victims lay frozen in their final moments, their stories locked inside plaster casts and ash. And artificial intelligence looked where humans couldn't.
The material's been analysed microscopically, and we know that it's made of linen. This is actually a fragment of material from Pompeii.
Advanced scanning technology peeled back layers of assumption, revealing bone fractures that told stories of unimaginable violence.
Few of the bodies show any sign of damage or violence.
DNA that exposed false narratives and chamber details that made the disaster far more horrific than anyone imagined. What the machines found wasn't just death, it was something much darker.
To know who were these people and how were the last moments of their lives.
The breakthrough started with frustration. Archaeologists had been staring at Pompeii's plaster casts for over a century, seeing only the outer shells of bodies. Traditional X-rays gave glimpses of bone, but the technology was limited, grainy, incomplete. Then someone had an idea. What if we trained artificial intelligence to see what we couldn't?
Has helped us to bring those computer databases and bring all of that wealth of information that was typically confined to our offices and our libraries and our museums, and bring it to the trench side.
State-of-the-art CT scanners began working overtime at Pompeii, capturing thousands of cross-sectional images of each plaster cast. The machines generated data, massive amounts of it, terabytes per artifact. But raw data meant nothing without interpretation. That's where AI algorithms came in, trained on thousands of skeletal scans from medical databases and archaeological collections. These systems learned to distinguish between plaster, bone, volcanic ash, and something researchers hadn't expected to find: remnants of soft tissue. The AI didn't just see bones, it detected density variations that indicated cartilage fragments, picked up microscopic fiber patterns that suggested preserved muscle tissue, and identified tooth enamel details invisible to human researchers. When archaeologists had dismissed certain scan anomalies as noise, the AI recognized them as real biological material, evidence that had survived nearly 2 millennia inside the protective plaster shells. The 3D reconstruction capabilities changed everything. Color-coded digital models allowed researchers to virtually peel away layers, zooming into joints to examine wear patterns, rotating skulls to study dental structure, and separating overlapping bones that had been impossible to analyze when jumbled together. Each scan took up to 12 hours to complete, and processing the data required even more time, but the results were worth it. Virtual unwrapping technology, similar to techniques used on ancient scrolls, let researchers see inside spaces without physically disturbing them. They could examine the interior of collapsed chambers, peer into sealed containers, and reconstruct entire room layouts from scattered debris. The technology created digital twins of Pompeii's spaces, perfect virtual replicas that could be explored, manipulated, and studied without risking damage to the actual artifacts.
Well, one way that technology is really helping us to understand the city as archaeologists is through having tools like tablet computers. So, for example, the iPad. In the past, we would come and be reliant upon notepads and pencils.
This wasn't just about better images. The AI could detect patterns across hundreds of victims, comparing bone structures, identifying commonalities in trauma, and revealing systematic differences between social classes that individual examinations had missed. The machines processed information faster and more thoroughly than any human team could manage, and they didn't bring preconceptions about what they should find. The real violence of Vesuvius. The scans revealed a truth more brutal than the peaceful death researchers had assumed. For years, the narrative went like this: poisonous gases overwhelmed Pompeii's residents. They fell asleep, ash buried them, quick, relatively painless. The AI analysis destroyed that comfortable fiction. The bones told a different story. Fractures appeared in patterns consistent with extreme blunt force trauma. Not from falling buildings, but from the pyroclastic surge itself. The superheated cloud of gas, ash, and rock fragments that swept through Pompeii hit with the force of a freight train. Temperature estimates put the surge at around 300 degrees Celsius, hot enough to instantly vaporize soft tissue and cause bones to crack from rapid heat exposure.
6 surges of hot gas that flowed down and instantly killed with the heat whoever was left.
AI algorithms mapped these heat-related fractures across dozens of victims, finding consistent patterns. Skulls showed thermal damage that indicated brain tissue had boiled. Long bones displayed stress fractures from tissues expanding and contracting in milliseconds. The scans even captured evidence of bone marrow that had been superheated, creating pressure that fractured bones from the inside out. But temperature wasn't the only killer. The pyroclastic flow traveled at speeds exceeding 100 kilometers per hour. When it hit, the sheer kinetic force caused catastrophic injuries. Ribs showed compression fractures, suggesting victims' chests were crushed by the impact. Spinal columns displayed damage, indicating bodies were violently thrown or compressed. Some skulls had fractures inconsistent with falling debris. These people were hit by something moving at tremendous velocity. The AI detected something else in the bone structure, evidence of instantaneous muscle contraction. When the superheated surge hit, victims' muscles contracted with such force that some bones were pulled apart at the joints. This wasn't a peaceful death at all. It was violent, sudden, and unimaginably painful, even if it lasted only seconds. Microscopic analysis of bone cross-sections revealed more horror. The AI identified patterns in bone cell structure that indicated extreme stress in the moments before death. Some victims showed evidence of trying to breathe. Their rib structures captured mid-expansion, frozen in the act of gasping for air that had turned to fire. The technology also revealed layers to the disaster. Not everyone died in the first surge. Some victims showed bone damage consistent with surviving the initial blast, only to be buried by subsequent waves of ash and pumice. These people might have lived minutes or even hours slowly suffocating under growing mounds of volcanic material.
If they should die by suffocation, we should expect to find them just defending themselves or trying to breathe.
Their bone positions suggested continued movement after the first impact, desperate attempts to dig out or find air. Final moments in the chambers. The scanning technology didn't just reveal how people died, it showed where they died and what they were doing in those final moments. And the details were heartbreaking. One chamber, likely part of a bathhouse complex, contained multiple victims clustered together. The AI reconstruction showed they had attempted to barricade the door. Furniture fragments appeared in the scan data positioned against the entrance. These people had understood what was coming and tried to shelter from it. The walls they trusted to protect them instead became their tomb.
See this relatively tiny opening? It leads under the women's bathing rooms.
The positions of the bodies told individual stories. One victim had been clutching coins. The AI detected the metal composition through the plaster, revealing a small fortune held in a death grip. Another had jewelry still on their fingers and around their neck. These weren't people caught unaware. They had time to grab valuables, time to run, time to hide, but nowhere was safe. In smaller rooms and alcoves throughout Pompeii, the scans revealed victims in fetal positions, arms wrapped around their heads. This wasn't peaceful repose, it was defensive posture, trying to protect vital organs and airways from the incoming destruction. Some had pressed themselves into corners, backs against walls, as if trying to merge with the structure for protection. The AI analysis of chamber layouts revealed something particularly disturbing. Many victims had fled to interior rooms without windows, thinking enclosed spaces would be safer. They were wrong. The pyroclastic surge found every opening, every gap, every pathway. The scans showed how the superheated gas had filled these chambers completely, flash-cooking everyone inside. One remarkable find was a group of victims in what appeared to be a storage room. The AI detected the remains of wooden shelving and ceramic containers through the volcanic material. These people had hidden among supplies, perhaps hoping the debris around them would provide insulation or protection. The scan showed their bones pressed against walls and corners. They had tried to make themselves as small as possible. Objects clutched in death provided another layer of tragedy. The AI could detect organic materials that had partially carbonized, wooden toys, fabric bundles, even what appeared to be pet remains held close. These weren't just random victims of a natural disaster. They were individuals with possessions they loved, creatures they cared for, lives they fought desperately to preserve. The technology revealed attempted escapes too. Some chambers showed evidence of people who had tried to break through walls or dig through accumulating ash. Skeletal hand positions suggested clawing, pushing, desperate physical effort. The volcanic material had hardened around these frozen attempts at survival, preserving the exact moment when hope died. The lies we believed. Perhaps the most disturbing revelations came not from how people died, but from who they actually were. DNA analysis guided by AI-enhanced extraction techniques demolished some of Pompeii's most famous stories. The mother and child cast, one of Pompeii's most iconic images, turned out to be nothing of the sort. DNA analysis revealed they weren't even related. The smaller figure, long assumed to be a young child, pressed against its mother's chest in final embrace, was likely an unrelated adolescent. The larger figure was male, not female. The touching narrative of maternal love in the face of death was a complete fabrication, a story archaeologists had projected onto the evidence. This wasn't an isolated case. Multiple family groups identified by proximity and position turned out to be genetically unrelated. The AI-assisted DNA extraction could work with tiny bone samples, pulling viable genetic material from specimens that traditional methods had written off as too degraded. The results forced a complete re-evaluation of Pompeii's social structure. Some supposed family units were actually masters and slaves, others were business associates, guests, or simply people who happened to die near each other. The assumed family bonds that had shaped decades of interpretation were largely fiction. Pompeii's story wasn't about families dying together. It was more chaotic, more random, more isolated than that. The technology also corrected gender identifications. Many victims identified as women based on jewelry or clothing fragments turned out to be men. Others assumed to be men based on size were actually women. Ancient Roman fashion and social customs were more complex than modern researchers had assumed, and the AI-backed DNA analysis revealed how often those assumptions had been wrong. Social class identification got a major revision too. Researchers had used burial location and associated objects to determine status, but DNA analysis told a different story. Some victims found in humble areas had genetic markers suggesting better nutrition and health than their surroundings implied. Others in wealthy villas showed evidence of lives filled with hard physical labor. The neat social hierarchies researchers had constructed were messier and more complicated than anyone realized. The AI analysis also revealed unexpected diversity in Pompeii's population. DNA markers indicated people from across the Mediterranean region and beyond. This wasn't a homogeneous Roman town, it was a cosmopolitan trading center with residents from Africa, Asia Minor, and Northern Europe. The genetic diversity was far greater than traditional archaeology had suggested. Perhaps most significantly, the corrected identifications changed the narrative of heroism and cowardice that had been attached to various victims. Stories of fathers protecting families, brothers shielding sisters, and servants dying alongside masters were mostly projection. The reality was more scattered, more individualistic, more terrifying. When death came at 100 kilometers per hour wrapped in superheated gas, there were no heroes, no last stands, no meaningful protection one person could offer another. Bodies tell brutal truths. The AI didn't stop at identifying who people were. It revealed how they had lived, and those revelations painted a harsh picture of ancient Roman society. Joint analysis provided the clearest window into daily life. The AI examined wear patterns on hip joints, knees, and vertebrae, comparing them across victims and against modern medical databases. The results were stark. Many Pompeii residents had endured brutal physical labor from young ages. Some skeletons showed joint degradation consistent with carrying heavy loads daily for decades. Others had repetitive stress injuries that indicated specific occupations: potters, weavers, farmers, dock workers. Their bones were biographical records written in wear and damage. The class divide was literally written in bone density. Wealthier individuals, identified through DNA, associated objects, and home locations, had better bone structure, suggesting superior nutrition during development. Their joints showed less wear, their spines had fewer compression injuries, their overall skeletal health was significantly better. Meanwhile, lower-class victims displayed what the AI flagged as malnutrition markers: reduced bone density, growth interruptions visible in long bones, and developmental issues consistent with inadequate childhood nutrition. Dental analysis revealed even more uncomfortable truths. The AI could examine tooth enamel in microscopic detail, identifying wear patterns, decay, and even dietary signatures preserved in the mineral structure. Many victims had severe dental disease, abscesses, cavities, worn-down teeth that would have caused chronic pain. Without modern dentistry, these people likely suffered for years with untreated dental problems.
With the plastic casts, give us a lot of data about, for example, how they used to eat. In the teeth of the victims, you can see, for example, you can read the biography of the victim.
The AI detected something else in teeth: dietary patterns. Microscopic analysis of enamelware revealed that most Pompeii residents ate a fiber-rich, low-sugar diet based on grains, vegetables, and occasional meat. The wealthy had access to more varied diets, while the poor relied heavily on bread and grain-based meals. Surprisingly, despite the low sugar intake, dental disease was rampant, likely due to grit in flour from stone grinding mills which wore down teeth faster than modern processed food. Old injuries told stories of untreated trauma. The AI identified healed fractures throughout the victim population, broken arms that had set improperly, cracked ribs that had mended at odd angles, skull fractures that had healed with visible deformities. Some victims had multiple old fractures, suggesting lives filled with physical accidents or violence. Without modern medical intervention, these injuries had simply been endured. Evidence of disease appeared throughout the scanned population. The AI detected bone changes consistent with infections that had spread through the body, possibly tuberculosis, which was common in the ancient world. Others showed signs of arthritis, bone cancer, and developmental disorders. These weren't the healthy, idealized Romans of classical art. They were real people dealing with illness, pain, and physical limitations. Perhaps most disturbing were the signs of violence predating the eruption. Some skeletons showed healed injuries consistent with the interpersonal violence: defensive fractures in forearms, impact damage to skulls, broken jawbones. The AI flagged these patterns across enough victims to suggest that violence was relatively common in Pompeii, not the peaceful paradise some popular narratives portrayed. The youngest victims showed their own tragic patterns. Child skeletons displayed growth interruptions, horizontal lines in long bones indicating periods of severe stress or malnutrition during development. Some children had already developed joint problems from labor before reaching adolescence. Childhood in ancient Pompeii, especially for the poor, was harsh and unforgiving. The Herculaneum Connection. While Pompeii's chambers revealed horrors through body scans, the nearby town of Herculaneum contributed its own disturbing evidence through a different technological breakthrough, one involving ancient texts that should have been destroyed forever. When Vesuvius erupted, Herculaneum was hit even harder than Pompeii. The pyroclastic flows that reached Pompeii hours after the eruption's start slammed into Herculaneum almost immediately. The temperature was higher, the impact more direct, the destruction more complete, but Herculaneum also preserved something remarkable: an entire library of papyrus scrolls carbonized by the intense heat into blackened, fragile cylinders.
This in my hands is 15 meters long, but it's only 5 centimeters now. So we have to virtually unroll it to see the letters inside.
For centuries, these scrolls were useless. Any attempt to physically unroll them resulted in destruction. The carbonized material crumbled at the slightest touch. Hundreds of texts, potentially containing lost works of philosophy, history, and literature, were readable but inaccessible. Then, virtual unwrapping technology changed everything. The same scanning technology used on Pompeii's victims was adapted for scrolls. High-resolution X-ray CT scans could image the interior of rolled papyrus without touching it. But there was a problem. The ink used in ancient texts was carbon-based, just like the carbonized papyrus. Traditional scans couldn't distinguish ink from substrate. They looked identical. Enter artificial intelligence. Researchers trained machine learning algorithms on modern papyrus samples, teaching the AI to detect subtle density variations and pattern differences that indicated ink versus plain papyrus. The Vesuvius Challenge, an organized competition, pushed this technology further, offering prizes for extracting readable text from the Herculaneum scrolls. The breakthrough came with synchrotron imaging and particle accelerator technology. These advanced scanning methods, combined with AI interpretation, finally revealed text inside these sealed scrolls. The first identified word was Greek, diatrope, meaning disgust or displeasure. More text followed, philosophical discussions, possibly from lost works by Epicurean thinkers who had influenced ancient Roman thought. But the content of these texts added to the disturbing picture of Pompeii and Herculaneum. The documents revealed a society deeply concerned with pleasure, pain, and the nature of death. These weren't abstract philosophical musings, they were practical guides for living in a world where suffering was constant and death could come without warning. The eruption proved those fears were entirely justified. The AI-assisted text extraction revealed something else, evidence that Herculaneum's residents knew Vesuvius was dangerous. Ancient texts contained references to earlier earthquakes and volcanic activity in the region. The massive earthquake of AD 62 had damaged both towns significantly. Repairs were still underway when the final eruption struck. These people lived under a volcano they knew could kill them, yet they stayed. Economic necessity, family ties, or simple inability to relocate kept them in the shadow of death. The scrolls also provided context for the victims found in Herculaneum's boat chambers, groups of people huddled together by the sea, waiting for rescue that never came. Some texts discussed evacuation plans, boat schedules, and contingencies for disaster. These weren't unprepared victims caught unaware. They had plans, procedures, and escape strategies. None of it mattered when the pyroclastic surge hit. The technology continues to reveal more text, with each new passage adding depth to our understanding of life before the eruption. But every revelation makes the disaster more personal, more real, more horrifying. These weren't faceless ancient people, they were individuals with thoughts, fears, plans, and hopes, all documented in text that survived, buried for 2 millennia. Reconstructing lost luxury. The AI technology revealed horror in Pompeii's victims, but it also uncovered astonishing details about how the wealthy lived before disaster struck, and the contrast made the tragedy even more stark. One of the most significant discoveries was a massive private bathhouse, possibly the largest ever found in a Pompeii residence. The scans revealed multiple chambers with elaborate plunge pools, hot rooms, cold rooms, and changing areas. This wasn't a public facility, it was someone's private luxury, equivalent to having a full spa inside your home. What made this discovery particularly poignant was the evidence of ongoing renovation. The AI-assisted reconstruction showed that work was in progress when Vesuvius erupted. Scaffolding impressions appeared in the volcanic material. Tools were found scattered throughout the structure. Paint on some frescoes was still wet when it was buried. The owners had been improving their already lavish property, investing in more luxury, planning for a future that would never come. The frescoes themselves benefited from AI restoration. Advanced robots equipped with imaging systems worked through thousands of fragments, pieces of painted plaster blown apart by the eruption or collapsed over centuries. Traditional restoration was painstakingly slow and often resulted in incorrect reassembly. The AI systems used pattern recognition, color matching, and probabilistic modeling to piece together artworks that human restorers had deemed impossible to reconstruct.
And show scenes of mythology and so on, but more crucially for us, precisely reflect the kind of things that occurred in houses and bars and shops and so on.
Restored images revealed stunning artworks, mythological scenes, garden landscapes, architectural illusions, and portraits. The detail was extraordinary. Individual brushstrokes were visible, color gradations showed sophisticated painting techniques, and the compositions demonstrated high artistic skill. This wasn't primitive art. It was sophisticated professional work that would be impressive in any era. 3D reconstructions using scan data allowed researchers to create digital twins of entire rooms. These virtual spaces showed not just floor plans, but actual lived environments, where furniture sat, how light entered through windows, where decorations were placed, even how sound would have echoed off the walls. Walking through these digital recreations provided insight into daily life that no written account could match. The reconstructions also revealed the shocking wealth inequality in Pompeii. While some residents lived in sprawling villas with private bathhouses and dozens of rooms, others occupied cramped quarters with minimal amenities. The scans showed that some of the poorest residents lived in what were essentially storage rooms attached to commercial buildings, spaces never intended for human habitation but used out of necessity. Multi-level housing came into focus through the scanning technology. Traditional excavation had struggled with collapsed upper floors, but AI analysis of debris patterns could reconstruct second and third stories. Many buildings were taller than previously thought, with wealthy owners on lower floors and poorer residents or slaves housed above. The vertical social stratification was literal. Your place in society determined how high you lived, and when the eruption came, those upper floors collapsed first. The technology revealed commercial and residential spaces intertwined in complex ways. Ground floors often housed shops, workshops, or entertainment venues, while living quarters occupied rear areas or upper levels. The AI could distinguish between different functional spaces based on artifact patterns, floorware, and architectural features. Pompeii wasn't neatly zoned like a modern city. It was a chaotic mix of business and domestic life. Perhaps most intriguing were the reconstruction details that suggested Pompeii was a city in transition. Construction projects throughout the town indicated growth, investment, and optimism about the future. New buildings were rising, old structures were being renovated, and the overall trajectory was toward increasing prosperity. The eruption didn't just freeze a moment in time, it cut short a future that had seemed promising. The data behind a death. The technology that revealed Pompeii's secrets required an almost incomprehensible amount of data processing and analysis. Understanding the scale helps appreciate both the achievement and what it revealed. Each plaster cast required approximately 12 hours of continuous CT scanning to capture sufficient detail. The scanners rotated around the casts, taking thousands of cross-sectional images from every angle. Each image was a thin slice through the cast, sometimes less than a millimeter thick, building up a complete volumetric model of everything inside. The data generated was massive. A single cast could produce terabytes of raw scan data. Processing this information required specialized computers running for days or weeks, assembling the cross-sections into navigable 3D models, then applying AI algorithms to identify and classify different materials. Multiply this across hundreds of casts, and the computational requirements become staggering. But raw scans were only the beginning. The AI algorithms had to be trained to recognize what they were seeing. This meant feeding the systems thousands of reference scans, modern skeletal material, tissue samples, various minerals and materials, so the machine learning models could learn to distinguish between them. The AI essentially learned anatomy, geology, and archaeology simultaneously, developing the ability to identify features that even expert humans might miss. The detection of cartilage remnants was particularly impressive. Cartilage is soft tissue that normally degrades quickly after death. Finding any trace after nearly 2,000 years should be impossible. But the unique conditions inside plaster casts, sealed from oxygen, protected from moisture, compressed by volcanic material, had preserved microscopic traces. The AI detected these by identifying density patterns and chemical signatures that indicated preserved collagen, the protein that forms cartilage structure. Soft tissue traces were even more remarkable. The AI identified fiber patterns in scan data that suggested muscle tissue had briefly survived inside the casts before degrading. These weren't visible as distinct structures, but as ghostly impressions in the volcanic material, negative spaces where tissue had been, chemical residues left behind, and compression patterns in the surrounding ash. The AI learned to recognize these subtle indicators, reconstructing the ghost of anatomy that had disappeared millennia ago. Microfractures provided another data-rich source of information. The AI could detect cracks in bones measuring mere micrometers across, far too small for human observation. Without destructive microscopic analysis, these tiny fractures carried information about stress, trauma, and the biomechanics of death. The AI analyzed thousands of these fractures across multiple victims, identifying patterns that revealed common causes and shared experiences in those final moments. The dental analysis demonstrated the AI's capability for extracting maximum information from minimal evidence. Tooth enamel is the hardest substance in the human body, and it preserves chemical signatures of diet, environment, and health throughout a person's life. The AI examined enamel structure at microscopic scales, identifying growth rings similar to tree rings, chemical variations that indicated dietary changes, and wear patterns that suggested specific foods and eating habits. The processing pipeline for each artifact was complex. Raw scans underwent noise reduction to remove imaging artifacts. Segmentation algorithms separated different materials: plaster, bone, ash, metal, organic residues. Classification systems identified specific bones, their orientation, and their condition. Reconstruction algorithms assembled fragmented skeletons. Comparative analysis matched findings against databases of modern and ancient specimens. Finally, interpretation systems applied archaeological context to the raw data, suggesting what everything meant. The technology wasn't perfect. AI algorithms made mistakes, misidentifying materials or missing subtle features. But the error rate was significantly lower than human interpretation of traditional X-rays. The AI could flag uncertain identifications for human expert review. The combination of machine speed and human judgment created an analysis pipeline more powerful than either could achieve alone. What made this technology particularly valuable was its non-destructive nature. Traditional analysis often required breaking open casts, removing bone samples, or otherwise damaging the artifacts. The AI-assisted scanning preserved the casts intact while extracting more information than destructive techniques could provide. Future researchers could rescan the same artifacts with improved technology, building on previous work rather than starting over with damaged material. The ongoing nature of the project means discoveries continue. As AI algorithms improve and scanning technology advances, researchers regularly rescan existing casts and find new details that earlier analysis missed. Pompeii's victims still have secrets to reveal, and the machines keep finding them.